Good afternoon, everyone. We are now a matter of hours away from an unprecedented lockdown of our country in order to combat an unprecedented virus that, left unchecked, would have an unacceptable toll on New Zealanders.
New Zealand had a pandemic plan and it was designed around the flu.
It became apparent that if we followed the steps in our pandemic plan, we would go down the track of other countries and not being able to manage the outbreak in our communities. So we had to change tack.
Our plan is simple. We can stop the spread by staying at home and reducing contact.
All across the country, stores are emptying and so are the streets as New Zealand gets ready for the lockdown.
Non-essential businesses in New Zealand must now close. All bars, restaurants, cafes, cinemas, pools, playgrounds.
Were we overreacting? Some people said we were. And certainly when the scientists say shut the borders and lock down the country, that's quite a hard scenario to justify. We'd predicted that after we locked down, the cases would continue to go up.
There are 40 new confirmed cases. There are 50 new, there are 78, there are 85 new cases of COVID-19 in New Zealand.
We all held our breath as we saw the numbers start to level out and realised that the lockdown was probably working.
The WHO guidance on how to respond effectively to the pandemic was really clear. The core public health measures of testing, contact tracing, isolation of cases and close contacts were fundamental to being able to break the chain of transmission in our community. We had already established our testing capacity and we continued to increase that and started to test more widely.
In the past 24 hours, more people have recovered from COVID-19 than have caught it.
Pleased to report that today there are no new cases of COVID-19 in New Zealand.
Good news, our 13th consecutive day of no new cases. A really core part of our success in this was the coherence and comprehensiveness of our communication campaign.
I'm speaking directly to all New Zealanders today to give you as much certainty and clarity as we can as we fight COVID-19.
It was really important to have very clear and consistent messaging.
This is a COVID-19 announcement.
That helped the population to understand the why and also what was expected of them. New Zealand got to a point where we had 24 days without a new case, and we effectively have been able to open up most of the economy, but with still very stringent border measures.
What's your
immediate reaction when you heard there were no active cases of COVID-19 remaining in New Zealand?
I did a little dance.
We are really only at the end of the beginning, and we need to make sure we remain vigilant and don't undo all the good work we've done over the last few months.
And so while the job is not done, there is no denying this is a milestone. So can I finish with a very simple thank you, New Zealand.
Officials in New Zealand have reported another 13 cases of COVID-19, most of them linked to the recent outbreak in Auckland. Now, this comes a day after Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern postponed the general election, citing the rise in infections. On Monday, US President Trump took a shot at New Zealand, calling its cluster terrible.
In fact, even New Zealand, you see what's going on in New Zealand. They beat it. It was like front page, they beat it because they wanted to show me something. The problem is big surge in New Zealand. So, you know, it's terrible. We don't want that.
But New Zealand's Prime Minister was quick to set the record straight on that.
I don't think there's any comparison between New Zealand's current cluster and the tens of thousands of cases that are being seen daily in the United States.
New Zealand has reported about 1,300 cases since the pandemic began. The US is approaching 5.5 million.
COVID-19 is indiscriminate. perfectly healthy 41-year-old when I got this. It was horrific. I was very, very miserable.
Now it's back. Are we doing enough?
I think we've become incredibly complacent about it.
So we really do need to take it incredibly seriously.
Kiwis who've beaten COVID, speak out.
There's so many conspiracy theories out there. It just adds fear. If you love your family, you will do whatever you can to keep them safe.
I've just spent the afternoon at two really critical parts of our COVID-19 response. One stop was at ESR. Now, ESR labs are using things like genome sequencing technology to help us answer critical questions around the origin of our COVID-19 outbreak and just where that outbreak has moved to. It's a really helpful scientific piece of our puzzle as we make sure that we have our cluster under control. And right now, I'm at the National Contact Tracing Centre. This is the place where we have individuals working incredibly hard to make sure that when we have a COVID case, that they're contacting those close contacts, people they may have been in touch with or working around, making sure that they're isolating, quarantining, and that they're also getting tested. All of these parts of the puzzle help us to get ahead of COVID-19 and make sure that we can get New Zealand back into a place where we start lowering our restrictions again. I want to share my huge thanks to all those who are part of our resurgence plan. They're doing an incredible job keeping everyone safe. And to Aucklanders who have also been a critical part of this response, thank you. And even though we sit alongside many countries that have experienced resurgence, we have as a team done good work to limit the impact of that as much as possible. New Zealand is among a small number of countries that still has a low rate of COVID cases and one of the lowest COVID death rates in the world. To give you just one example, the United States has 16,563 cases per million people. We have 269 cases per million people. And the reason we have been able to do that is in large part because you have all played a role. New Zealand is among a small number of countries that still has a low rate of COVID cases and one of the lowest COVID death rates in the world. To give you just one example, the United States has 16,563 cases per million people. We have 269 cases per million people. And the reason we have been able to do that is in large part because you have all played a role. In our fight against this virus, we have held some records. Now the one we have to beat is around resurgence. And if any one country knows how to bounce back, it is us. This has been a hard year. It's been a hard year for Christchurch, who has fresh reminders of that this week. It's been a hard year for Auckland. It's been a hard year for drought-stricken and flood-ridden parts of the country. So if it feels hard right now, it's because it is. But let's also remember, in a world where 2020 has frankly been terrible, we are strong, we have been kind, and we are doing really well.